There are two different prodigal sons that are mainly talked about in the Bible. One we find in the New Testament in one of Jesus's parables. There you go, that's the name. In one of his parables, he has no name. He's just known as the prodigal son. The other one we see in the Old Testament, and his name is very well known. His name is Cain. These two men had two different outcomes. One of them, the prodigal son, he lived in a pigsty, but then returned home. Cain, however, he killed his brother, like we already know. He killed his brother, but never went back home. He separated himself not only from his family, but also from God after that. The choice that he made after that not only separated him from God, but his sons paid the price and became worse for it as well. Welcome, my name is Abigail Estrada, and these are extension classes for our student ministry. And here we are helping our teens start their walk with Christ and strengthen their relationship with God. And we're going to start off today's topic talking about these two prodigal sons. All right, so before we go into the prodigal sons, though, let's do a really quick review. We have been talking about the journey to the cross. The Garden of Gethsemane was the first place that Jesus shed his blood when he sweated blood. And here we learned that Jesus learned submission, he learned to humble himself, and he learned obedience. On the second place that Jesus shed his blood was in the whipping post, and he did that for you and me. In the whipping post is where we found healing, restoration, and also protection from all sickness and diseases. Today we're going to be talking about the third area that Jesus shed his blood, and these are the bruises from the beatings that he received on the walk to the cross. So let's look at these two different prodigal sons. On one hand, we see Cain. On the other hand, we see the prodigal son. They both made their choices and both went into dark places. But today I'm going to talk about not just the life they lived, but the choice they made after confronting the consequences of the life that they chose. Okay? So, and because of how they confronted the consequences, because they confronted it very differently, their outcomes became very different. So let's first look at the prodigal son first. So the prodigal son, we already know the story a little bit. And if you don't, I'm going to post somewhere around here the verse for that. But the prodigal son decided to return home to his father after the party life that he basically lived. He took money from his dad. Well, he didn't take money. His father gave him the money because he was adamant that he wanted to leave. So his father gave him money and he went off and he lived a party life. And that was the life that he chose to live. He chose to live a party life. But once the money ran out, all his friends left him, abandoned him, and he was stuck in a pigsty for work so that he could survive. But then he ended up finding out that, not really finding out, more like he had that aha moment that, wait a minute, why am I here? Why am I living here when if I can go back to my father, his servants are treated better than how I'm being treated now. So he made the conscious decision and choice to return back to his father, denying himself the title of ownership, the title of son. That he let go of that and he took upon himself the position of servanthood. But when he returns home and his father sees him, he doesn't welcome him back as a servant. Instead, he calls out to his son and receives him as his son again, and his life is changed forever. Then we have Cain. Cain was very different. He didn't go back to his family after the choice that he made, after killing his own brother. He didn't submit himself. He didn't want to admit to the mistake that he made. Instead, what he decided to do is he went to God and he said, you know what, God, I still want nothing to do with you. I don't want anything to do with my family anymore. But I do want your protection because I know that after the choice I made, the decision I made, people are going to come after me for it. So what I want from you is protection, but at the same time, I want nothing from you. When you look, that's basically what Cain said to God. And when you look at that, I was like, I guess I never really understood what Cain was actually trying to say to God until I started getting older and I started realizing how many times we've done that ourselves. How many times we go to God and we say we want healing, we want protection, we want this from him, but at the same time we want nothing to do with him. And this is exactly what Cain ended up doing. But he took it farther and he separated himself completely from God, from his family, and everything to do with God. And what ended up happening was something really bad, because that separation is that he didn't just separate himself from God and his family. At that point in time, he already had a family of his own. And when he separated himself, he also separated his family along with himself. So he separated his family from his parents, but not only that, but he also separated them from God. And the result of that is his son became a murderer as well. And he used the example of his father as a way to justify himself, and used it as an example to protect himself. It just went from bad to worse real fast. That was really the beginnings. Well, not really the beginnings, because we already saw it with Adam and Eve, but with Cain, we really see front and center the beginnings of generational curses, which is what we're going to be talking about in the next two classes, generational curses. Because the thing about generational curses, because I'm just giving you an introduction to this real quick. A generational curse starts with one, but it continues along the line in the family. And here's where I want you guys to see this. When we're looking at Exodus chapter 34, verse 7, let's look at that real quick. It says, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation. All right, so if you guys see that, for those of you that don't know, iniquity that was being passed from generation, that is a generational curse we're talking about. But iniquities essentially is this. Iniquities is the sins that are being passed down from one generation to another. For the most part, if someone is a drug addict, there's already a history about it in their family as well. If they're alcoholic, there's a history also with that. But it's not just those things. It's sins. If you're a liar, that is being passed down. If you are an adulterer, that's being passed down. A sin that is being committed, it starts somewhere, yes, but it continues on in the following generations, and it continues to be passed down. When we're looking at, I have one more verse actually. Let me look at that one first before I continue on. So in Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, it reads this: you shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation for those who hate me. So when we're looking at this, we're seeing that Israelites are worshiping another God, and they're basically worshiping a thing at this point. It was something they created and they started worshiping. And God literally said, I am a jealous God, and I will punish the children of the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. When one person separates themselves from God, that separation continues on from the next generation to the next generation. It is pretty hard for the family to return back to God. And this is what he's basically mentioning. He says, for those who hate me. So in other words, he's saying here, there is a way out. And you know what? Jesus gave us that way out. When he was beaten and when they were beating him during the Via Dolorosa on his way to the cross, he was beaten so that those generation curses can be cut off. The difference between these two men was, one didn't stop the generational curse from continuing on. It just continued on with him. The other one, the prodigal son, the one that humbled himself, the one that submitted himself, the one that returned back home and accepted correction. He nipped it, and he didn't let that to continue on in his family. Here's the thing though. Generational curse doesn't necessarily have to start back in the past. It can also start with you. More on that next week. This is where I end it and say, God bless you guys. I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.